What is up, guys? Thank you so much for stopping by at the channel. I can't thank you guys enough for watching the videos. Today's going to be pretty informative, just like all the other YouTube videos. Most of you guys know that I'm located here in Michigan, so we're going to go ahead and head over to Wisconsin at my good buddy Mark's business, Kodiak Truck. You guys know my style. It's going to be the most informative YouTube video out there, hands down. One more thing I'd like to add: if you've already purchased a decal from the truckmasterdiesel.com website, make sure you guys email me. I'll leave that link in the description. Or you can also reach out to me on my Instagram, which is at truck_master07. Try to send me those pictures of those decals on your truck. I want to collaborate a bunch of pictures from you guys. I'm going to put it in my YouTube videos, probably somewhere in my intro and outro. It'd be really awesome, so I do appreciate that. So let's go ahead and head over to Wisconsin right now. Stay tuned. Wow, look guys, I'm in Wisconsin now. Crazy, huh? Alright, so hey, once again guys, welcome to the channel. So today, I'm going to show you guys, well, not me, Mark at Kodiak Truck, which is the owner here at Kodiak Truck in North Prairie, Wisconsin. He is going to show you guys how to disassemble, reassemble to a remanufactured unit front differential for a Duramax. So it's a 373. Correct. Is that correct?
Yep.
Awesome, awesome. I'm not going to be doing any of the talking, guys. Mark is going to take over on this video right here because he does have rightfully over 30 years of experience in driveline repair. If you guys are actually watching this video for instructional purposes and you guys really want to get this done right, make sure you watch the video from start to finish. Once again, thank you so much for stopping by at the channel, and make sure you stay tuned.
All right guys, today we're going to do a video here for you on rebuilding a 9 1/4 front diff. You've probably seen some of these videos before. I've seen a few on the internet myself. Probably the most problematic thing taking one of these apart is this little stub shaft. It's a 50% chance each time you go to get one of these out if it's going to come out or not. We've actually designed a tool that if this thing doesn't want to come out, it will take it out. The only downside is you will have to pull a differential out of the truck to use it. I know there's different wedges and stuff that they have that you can try to drive in there and break the snap ring and get the axle out and so on and so forth. I've seen those. I don't like the idea of galling up the housing real bad and everything else, because there is an adjuster wheel behind there that if you're changing ratios, you're going to need to adjust that in the opposite side to get your backlash right again and everything else. But we're going to go ahead and knock this thing down. I'm going to explain to you about this shaft and kind of do a little show and tell on that. And I think you guys will find this interesting. So basically what we do when we come to one of these, we have it situated like this. We'll give this thing a couple taps. 2 taps is a rule. If it doesn't come in 2 taps, we're not going to sit there and beat on it over and over. However, I have in the past taken these and rotate them about 90 degrees and try it again, and I've gotten them to go. Because you got to get that right spot just where that snap ring's going to drop, where it's not catching on the internal on the side gear. So we'll give this thing a couple shots and see what we got with this one. And it's a lucky day. Snap ring stayed in there, it's internal. But I'll explain to you what we've got and what we designed. And your axle would come in this direction on it. And what happens is that snap ring gets stuck on there and you can't get it out. Now they do make an updated axle shaft, but when you do that, you have to change all your internals, which is not a big deal if you got the differential already apart. Guys, so this is our snap ring that always gets stuck in here when they do. So what we've done is we've designed this tool right here, and what we're going to do is you're going to end up removing the back side of the housing, the side with the axle shaft tube, and you'll be able to take this, pull all the guts out of there, this little stubby shaft from this side. You'll be able to come right down through. It's going to come right up to that axle, and basically you're going to wind up and hit it with a sledge, a couple hits, and you'll drive that thing right out. It'll come right out. It's really a cool tool. We had a really rough prototype that we designed, and then Eric the machinist came up with this. We gave him some dimensions.
If I was to run into the situation, would you be able to make me a tool just like that where I can purchase it from you?
Yes. So yeah, we're gonna produce these and market them on the website. It'll either be on the Kodiak Truck website or Ryan's Diesel Service. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the 5 bolts for the axle tube. The actuator's already out. We're going to try to balance this too so you guys can see the internal pieces as we take this apart. In case you take yours apart and all the pieces spring out and you're like, where do I begin? So again, we're going to give this a light hit. Our whole axle tube assembly comes right off. We'll show that here in a few minutes when we disassemble all that. We've got our fork, our slider clutch piece as we call it. This is our engagement. So this fork, when the actuator hits this in the tube, it comes down. In two-wheel drive, it'll ride right here. When you engage four-wheel drive, the plunger will come out, push this down, and it'll lock into the inner shaft. And that's how you engage four-wheel drive on the front diff. And then when the actuator goes back the other way, the return spring will pop it back up and it'll sit right there. So we're going to go ahead and remove these pieces. We'll pull our spring. There's a thrust washer right here on the top. We're going to remove that. And then I got to grab my hook tool here. I'll get underneath there and just pop that shaft up and out. That's out. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to remove all the bolts that hold the top case here on. Guys, look on the housings, there's 3 spots here where you can catch. They actually make a tool that goes in here that's like a spreader to spread the case to separate them. Basically what we do is we just get underneath them, give them a light tap. Usually they come right apart. Once you get them split just a hair, you can get a flat blade underneath these and you can pry them right apart. You just work your way around. You're going to have a dowel pin at this end and you're going to have one right down here at this far end. And again, you just kind of give it a little finesse. I'll get the flat blade in there and just give this a hit down and you get the top right off. There's one half of our housing with our carrier race in there and the axle support bearing. You can already see this differential's got a substantial amount of wear and goo in it. So he definitely had things coming unhinged. We actually put a reman in his customer's truck last week and this is his core. And then what we got left is we're going to pull our yoke off and we're going to get our pinion assembly out of here and then we're going to get these races out. And I've got something else to show you guys on that too. Sometimes these races are pretty tough to get out. I've got a series of tools. I'm going to explain what they are and show them to you, and I know you guys are going to find it interesting. You can buy them from your Mac tool dealer and they work excellent. So we're going to go ahead and get the pinion off this right now, the pinion nut, and pull the yoke. I always use a T-puller on these. Snap-on's got a great one, and that way you're not beating on the yoke or doing anything stupid, due to the fact that these yokes, if nobody's messed with it, does have a type of almost like pipe sealant, like pipe dope on them to keep the gear oil or anything from leaking between the splines and down and out. So we're just going to go ahead and run our T-puller down, and our yoke is off. When removing the pinion out of here, we've got a couple different options and different things I've used over the years. We got to be very careful we don't mess up these threads. 9 times out of 10, the pinion does not want to push out of here all too easy. I've got a dead soft lead hammer that I will use, that I will hit on the end of here, that will not hurt the end of this. I can drive this out and then we can get the races out. If that doesn't work, what I end up doing is putting the pinion nut back on. I stand this housing on end and I have a blunt bit that goes right down the center with my Mac air chisel, and it's just a flat bit, and I'll walk the pinion right out of the housing. We'll try the lead hammer and see what that does. So we'll take a couple swings with this and see what happens, and if it doesn't want to move real easy, then we'll go to plan B. Plan A is working. There's our pinion. We've got that out. You guys can look, we haven't done anything, no damage to the threads at all. This hammer is so soft, the hammer takes all the beating. Hammers for me only last about a year and I got to get new ones made. So we'll go ahead, we'll get these races out. I'm going to do a quick rinse on this, get some of the gear oil out of here, clean this up lightly just in the solvent tank by hand. We'll work on getting them races out, and then we'll get these housings completely stripped and in the hot tank. So we're going to get this race out. Sometimes these things get stuck in here. We're fortunate enough to have a hot tank, so when we put these in the hot tank, if we flip this side down to the bottom of the basket, sometimes the heat will just release them and they'll slide right out. But there's 2 little areas down in here and it's kind of hard to see. They're apart from each other. And what I do is I took this old, cheap, not real expensive mini pry bar hook deal, and I kind of custom ground it so I could get underneath that thing just to get it to crack loose on each side. So you work it down in there, We're going to get underneath here and we're going to just pry lightly. And this is, you got to be careful because these housings are razor sharp. I'm going to come over here and pry this way a little bit. And I'm just going to work these back and forth just a hair. And then I'm going to switch off to a different series of pry bars. Now I got it up just a little bit. And Mac Tools makes these two little hook tools, I call them. They come as a set. They classify them as injector pullers. They work absolutely perfect. I hook in one side. I'm going to hook in the opposite side. And I'm going to simply squeeze them together. And we're walking the race right up and out. Now I get it up that far, I put those down, and I go to my two bigger snap-on pry bars, and I offset them from each other, and I'll work them the rest of the way. And we got the race right out. So it works really good, really well, doesn't damage anything, and makes life easier. When we run them through the hot tank, we basically got these housings 100% stripped, so there's nothing in them. We're going to pop our axle seal out next. I just use a long pry bar, get underneath it, give it a little pry, work with it, and it seals out. We take my punch and drive that bearing out.
That was perfect.
We're just going to catch the edge of this bearing. I'll just drive it inward. We'll work on yet getting the pinion bearings out, the pinion bearing out, the small one, and the races, and then we're going to dump this in the hot tank. What I'm going to do is I'm going to knock this outer race out. I'm going to take the seal and the bearing and everything in one shot. It'll kind of come shooting out of here. But we're just going to catch inside here and we're going to drive this out. It's going to take a couple, 2-3 hits with my little mini sledge to get this out. There's the bearing and the seal. Carefully tap this out. Got a race right here. We'll spin that out. All I do is stand this up. Sometimes if this race doesn't want to move too easy, I end up having to put this part on the floor at this point in time. Two areas, one right here and one on the opposite side. We're just going to work back and forth on that. We're going to drive that race down and out. On the other half of the housing, we're going to work on getting this race out and the bearing. All I do is put a flat blade underneath there. Usually you can get lucky, give it a little twist and they'll come up. They're not set as deep as the other ones. Got that race out. Now we'll just catch the edge of this bearing. We'll drive it out. And then I'll go ahead to the manual tank and I'll pre-wash a bunch of this with mineral spirits, and then we'll throw it in the hot tank and boil her all out. So we'll get everything cleaned and come back to you. So we got our bearing splitter on. We're going to pull one of our carrier bearings here. We got our snap-on T-puller. We're going to go ahead and pull this off. When you do this, all of a sudden, and I don't know if the camera picked it up, but you'll hear a little crack and all of a sudden it'll go. If you ever do this, you start pulling and pulling and pulling, and all of a sudden you see your splitter start to bow. Stop. Come to the top of this. Just take a hammer and give this a smack, and it's enough shock to crack that bearing loose, and it'll pop up 9 times out of 10. Alright, we got our one bearing off. We'll flip it and go to the other side. Alright, we got our other bearing off. Then we're going to end up taking this. We'll go over to the wash tank. We'll knock the ring gear off it yet later on, and we're going to wash that all up. We're also going to take apart our axle tube so we can get this all down. These things sometimes can be a little tricky. We got a snap ring down in here we're going to spread. It's a little tiny one. Got to kind of get that apart and get under it and try to hook it and start pulling it up. They like to bite really hard, so what I like to do is get in the middle of it if I can, and then come in with a flat blade and just kind of work it around slowly. And get up one side and the other, and then I just reach underneath it. We'll slide that right off. Got our snap ring off. I'm going to grab a magnet just to pull this stuff so you guys can kind of see how these pieces come out. Well, we're getting both of them here at once, but that's okay. So our top one is a thrust, and it's got a bevel on there. So you got to make sure the bevel side's up, because that's where the snap ring is going to butt up against. If you flip it over and look, this is a flat edge on there. Again, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but it's beveled down in. And then there's another thrust underneath that. Now everything's off here, we'll be able to tap our axle right out of here. Got that down. We'll end up putting this in the vise. We'll come in from behind, we'll knock the bearing and seal out of this. We'll get this stuff all washed up, and then we'll come back to inputting it together. We're going to go over to our press. These sometimes can be a little sketchy. If in fact your pinion bearing's really destroyed, you have to be careful on these. But the bearing can explode and you don't want to catch the thing in your face as you're pressing this out. Always reach underneath the press to try to hold that pinion so it doesn't crash down on the ground. Otherwise, you can put anything underneath there. You can put a cardboard box with a chunk of foam in it or something just to catch it when it pops off. So go ahead and pull the bearing off. We got our shim underneath there, our pinion shim. We'll look at that. And then we'll do a final wash on the ring and pinion, and we're going to look at that very closely. You can see this gear set is hurt. As I'm spinning this carrier, if you look, you can look to the inside here more. I'm going to go real quick. Right in there, you can see whether it's discoloration. That's actually wear. That's a wear wore out. Now that's the coast side of the gear. You've seen just prior to this in the video there, that was the drive side of the gear, and it is just all kinds of bad. And what we're going to do is we're going to slide this carrier out of the way, and then we'll slide in the different one, the one we're going to run, and you'll be able to see right away this is a beautiful gear set. The pinion on the other ring and pinion was just all galled up also. Somebody had been in the differential prior. I could tell it had sealant on it that wasn't factory. So we're going to go ahead and put this gear set in. We already got our new carrier bearings on this carrier. We'll get our pinion bearing pressed on, and then we'll get everything set in our housings. On the pinion, you can see, if you look at it coming all the way across the tooth to that outer edge, that is all galled up. It hammered the fluid. We probably had a bearing that went out, threw a little bit of metal in there, and or somebody was in this and didn't get the backlash proper. Regardless, the gear set is junk. I would never run anything like this. Even though your front end doesn't see that much use, you still would never run this. Again, you know, it's highly critical too that you guys just take the time to service your truck, change the fluid in it. A lot of this can be, you know, preempted if you just take the time to do that. And differentials and transfer cases have kept me going for many years, and there's a reason for that. People tend to not service them and change the fluid. So again, it's something you should definitely look at. On the fronts, we always run 75/90 full synthetic in them. So it's just, you know, good information for you guys, and keep your truck alive as long as you can, because it's a big investment. All right, we're going to drive the small race in. The base race is already in. We're going to drive the outer race in next. I actually have custom bearings and race drivers made. All right, you can hear that bottomed out. Just wipe this out because it's got a little oil debris on. We got our race down in there. We have our other race in here. And we'll go ahead and get the pinion in now. You'll see we got our pinion base bearing now pressed on there. We got our crush sleeve, our outer pinion bearing. I'm going to pre-lube these bearings with some gear oil, because when you set preload and everything else, you don't want to do this with a dry bearing. So I'm going to schmutz a bunch of gear oil on here, move it around, and then we're going to slide this thing up in there, get the yoke on, and I'm going to run the pinion nut down with my impact. I'm very comfortable with the tools I use here, and I know how to set preload. And I'll get the preload down, and we'll show you exactly what we got. We got our preload set. Basically, you're going to want a slight amount of drag on this. And you do it with the pinion seal out. If you're setting up, say, used bearings or something of that nature, you put a pinion seal in or something like that, and now you're going back and you're trying to torque that yoke on. There's all different methods how they tell you to do it on the internet and whatnot. Basically, this is going to be the rule of thumb. A, never preload a dry bearing. B, on a used bearing, never preload it so hard that it takes more pressure to start the rotation than to maintain it. So if you grab the yoke and you're grabbing and you're pushing and pushing, and all of a sudden it feels like it breaks loose and it starts turning freely, it's too tight and you're going to burn up pinion bearings. So we've got our pinion set here now. we're going to go ahead, we're going to put some, I'm just going to use a little bit of silicone spray to lube the bore. We're going to drop the race down in there, which is our race for the carrier. We're going to tap this down in. And we can hear it bottom out there, so we know we're all the way down in. Now we've got our carrier sitting here, ready to go with our ring gear on. We've got our gear marking compound already on it, so we can run our pattern. Again, we're going to put a little bit of lube on these bearings. We're going to go ahead and drop this in. I'm going to lube this side also. And then we're going to go ahead and get our race in the opposite side of the housing.
You make it look so easy.
I also suck at fishing, but that's another story. Now when we drop this half of this housing on, to keep that race from sliding back out of there as easy as it slid in, I kind of reach around with a couple fingers, just kind of hold it in place, and then drop it down. And once you get it close, you can let it go. We'll get our case halves on, we're going to run our bolts in, and then we're going to dial this thing forward and back and check our coast and drive on this. We're going to roll our pattern. We're going to run this thing around 2-3 times. We should be good right there. We'll pull the ring gear back out of here so you can see it, but if you can see our pattern, it's absolutely perfect. We can see we're hitting right here and we're tracking all the way across the tooth. Drive and coast sides both. Drive side's a little bit more inboard. That's the way I run the pattern. It's probably very difficult to see down in there, but we'll pull the ring gear and look at it. Due to the fact that under load, that pattern would want to move out anyways. So anything in a high performance application, extreme amount of load, anything like that, we don't set a textbook. And literally, we've got high horsepower stuff out there, and not to sound arrogant, but our stuff just doesn't blow up. It just runs and runs and runs. So we've got pull trucks that got 5 years on gear sets, where some guys won't even get a full season out of them. So we've got a beautiful pattern. We're going to go ahead, split the housing back apart. We can see right now our drive side of the gear, we're starting here and we're running all the way out to here. We've got an absolute perfect pattern going across there. If in fact under extreme load this pattern wants to move at all, it's going to go this direction. We're still contacting down through the center and solidly down through the center. When we look at the other side, the coast, absolutely beautiful. We're right where we need to be all the way through this whole thing. So as I said, we're going to go ahead, we're going to clean down our case halves, we're going to silicone this back up, get it together, get our pinion seal in, and finish this bad boy up. Alright guys, now we're going to take our pinion yoke back off, and we're going to get our pinion seal in. We took our yoke back off, we greased up our pinion seal, we greased the back side of it too so the spring doesn't pop off when we drive it in. We got the pinion seal back in, put our yoke back on, we Loctited our pinion nut, we ran it back down, and we carefully run that down till we feel the socket and the impact. I run about half throttle on the impact, and I'll feel it hit, and I know I'm right back down on that crush sleeve. We give it a turn and a test, and everything's perfect there. We're good to go. We obviously offer these differentials as remans in stock. We also have it with our own mechanical locking front differential. We're gonna drop in our axle bearing here now, and if you look at these bearings, you're gonna have one side that's got more of a rolled edge and a flat edge. We drive on the flat edge. Don't ever drive on that rolled edge. So we're gonna drop that down in. We use this slug driver. We'll tap it down in the housing. There we are, we're set in. Next, we're gonna drop our axle seal in, which we've already got greased all the way around. We're gonna drop that in. This is just gonna go down flush. That's it. We got our seal in. Now we're ready to drop our axle shaft in this side. We're gonna spread the snap ring, brand new snap ring. We got our snap ring on. We're gonna drop our axle shaft in. Kind of wheel her down in there. And I just take a dead blow to just drive it down in. One hit and she's in. We're gonna go put our fill plug back in. We're gonna put our drain plug back in. We're gonna snug these down. I don't suggest using an air impact wide open on these. You will bust the housing. I just run them down snug. And put our vent plug back in. Okay, we'll drop our bearing in there. We'll drop that slug down in there, and then I just use a punch to kind of reach down in there, lightly tap and drive our bearing down in. All right, our bearing's down flush. We're going to drop our axle shaft down in there. Take a little bit of grease. Just so this thrust washer doesn't slide out of place, I put a little bit of grease on there, put a little bit on here, and we're just going to locate it. Got that in place. We're going to drop our spring in. We're going to take our fork and our slider clutch and assemble that. And we're just going to leave her sit just like that. She'll probably pop up by the time we get the axle tube on there, and we'll just get her back down in there. Got to make sure we're driving on the flat side of the bearing, not the curved side. We're going to drop the bearing in. There we are, we're down flush. Take our axle seal that we already have greased, we're going to drop that in. And we're good there. Now we're going to take our long side axle shaft, we're going to take our tube, we're going to spin it around, we're going to drop it right down and on. Just kind of hit her down by hand. And then we're just going to go back in reverse order of how we took it apart. We're going to drop that thrust in, that'll center it. Again, we're going to drop this thrust in, but to make sure you have your bevel side up. Got that in. And then our snap ring by hand. And there we are. I always like to set that snap ring up against there, just when we put it together, just with a dead blow. So we're good to go. We'll get a bead of sealant on here, we'll clean down these gasket areas, and we'll drop the tube in. We're going to hold this fork in place, and we're going to make sure our washer is still lined up, which it is. I'm going to drop this down, and just like that, we're in. We'll put our 5 bolts in. All right, we're going to send this thing, it's all done, it's all assembled, ready to go. We're going to get it over to paint, just like that. And that's how I make it look brand new. And there we are, guys. We got a reman front diff ready to roll. 373 gear ratio for a Duramax diesel. We also got them for 410s. You guys, even with half tons, we got them. We got the 8 1/4s also. We stock all of them. Generally speaking, too, we also stock our posi unit more towards summertime for the truck pullers and dirt draggers and everything else. So, hope you guys found this video interesting.
That is exactly how you do it, and very informative stuff. And Mark, again, I can't stress enough, thank you so much for allowing me to bring my camera to your business and filming your special secrets, I guess, if you will. Not a lot of businesses will allow me to do that. You're the best in the business, and again, I do appreciate that. So once you've reassembled everything to its current remanufactured state, what is the most challenging thing? I know people are going to ask me that question. What would be the most challenging thing when putting all that together? I mean, whether it be like the bearings, pressing stuff in, or...
Yeah, the most critical things are going to be making sure you get the right preload on all the bearings, pinion and carrier bearings, which those are going to be your adjuster wheels on the side. And the other thing is going to be backlash, making sure your backlash is right. Your pattern's going to dictate a lot of the gear set. So that's the most crucial thing, is backlash and making sure you got preloads right. If you get that right and the pattern's right, you're golden. It takes a little bit to get used to it, know what you're looking at and what you're feeling, because again, on these types of differentials, you can't crawl inside the thing, you can't set anything up, everything's internal. So that's what you're fighting against.
Yeah, and it may look easy on video, and I know a lot of you guys reach out to me, especially in the comments, and say, hey, that looked great, I can take on it myself, which rightfully you probably do have that ability. But then again, when it comes down to experience, it definitely streamlines things. When I'm videoing it, it definitely looks really easy and simple. But if you just don't have the correct tools, the know-how, you may want to train yourself if you want to tackle a job like this, you know, from scratch. So other than that, guys, I do appreciate your time as always. Don't forget to subscribe if this is your first time stopping in. We'll see you on the next video. Take care.